Jerusalem, September 14th, 2025. The arrival of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Israel on Sunday set the stage for a dramatic diplomatic moment in a region already shaken by violence, condemnation, and urgent appeals for accountability. Against the backdrop of an unprecedented Israeli strike in Doha just days earlier, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sought to project confidence and reassurance about the state of U.S. Israeli ties. Rubio's trip marked his first as Secretary of State since assuming the role under President Donald Trump. His presence was intended to underline continuity in Washington's commitment to its closest ally in the Middle East, even as a political fallout deepened over Israel's decision to bomb a residential compound in Qatar that was hosting Hamas leaders. That strike rattled Gulf capitals, provoked international outrage, and tested the delicate balance of alliances that had defined regional diplomacy for years. Standing alongside Rubio in Jerusalem, Netanyahu framed the visit as a visible reminder of the durability of U.S. Israeli ties. The two men were seen together at the Western Wall, joined by their spouses and senior officials, in a series of images carefully curated for symbolism. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, declared, "This is my way of greeting an extraordinary friend of Israel, the Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, and his wife, Jeanette." I think his visit here is a testament to the durability, the strength of the Israeli-American alliance. It's as strong, as durable as the stones of the Western Wall that we just touched. Under President Trump, Secretary Rubio, and their entire team, this alliance has never been stronger. The Prime Minister's words were not just ceremonial. They were intended as a pointed message at a time when Israel's actions were under scrutiny. The Doha bombing, unprecedented in its brazenness, had hit not only Hamas leaders, but also the perception of Qatar's neutrality as a mediator in ceasefire talks. For Secretary Rubio, the visit was also a test. Before landing in Tel Aviv, he had already been pressed to respond to the international outcry over Israel's strike in Qatar. Rubio admitted there were issues to address, but remained firm that U.S. policy would not be fundamentally altered. He told reporters traveling with him that the bombing will not change the nature of U.S. relations with Israel. Still, he acknowledged there would have to be talk about it and the impact it will have. His phrasing reflected the tightrope Washington now walks, defending Israel's right to security while managing growing pressure from allies in the Arab world. President Trump himself had expressed outrage at the timing of the strike, particularly because it targeted leaders of Hamas on the soil of a key U.S. partner in the Gulf. Yet Trump's administration has so far maintained its firm line of support for Israel, emphasizing defense cooperation and intelligence sharing while urging restraint. If Netanyahu was eager to highlight strength, Qatar's leadership chose to amplify condemnation. The Gulf state, long involved in mediating negotiations in the Gaza conflict, saw the Israeli strike as an assault not just on Hamas, but also on its diplomatic credibility. At a press briefing in Doha, Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani delivered a fiery denunciation. Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, Prime Minister of Qatar, said, "The time has come for the international community to stop using double standards and to punish Israel for all the crimes it has committed. Israel needs to know that the ongoing war of extermination that our brotherly Palestinian people is being subjected to, and whose aim is to expel them from their land and forcibly displace them from their homeland, will not work, no matter how many claims it makes to justify it." His statement echoed through the region, resonating not only with Arab publics outraged at the Gaza conflict, but also with international actors worried about the precedent Israel's actions might set. Qatar, already under immense pressure for hosting Hamas leaders, now faced the challenge of balancing its mediator role with its own sovereignty and credibility. Since the outbreak of war in Gaza on October 7th, 2023, Israel has pursued a relentless campaign to dismantle Hamas. Leaders of the Islamist movement have been systematically targeted, their positions struck across Gaza and increasingly beyond. Netanyahu's government has made no secret of its objective, the destruction of Hamas's capacity to govern or wage war. In Gaza itself, the situation remains dire. Nearly 2 years of conflict have left the Strip devastated, with famine stalking its population and entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. Israeli forces continue their offensive in Gaza City, presenting it as one of Hamas's last bastions. The humanitarian toll, however, has prompted mounting calls for international intervention, aid and accountability. Israel insists the war is existential, framing it as a battle not just against Hamas, but against the broader threat of regional destabilization. Critics counter that the scale of civilian suffering and the expansion of attacks into neighboring states risks sparking uncontrollable escalation. Rubio's itinerary in Israel was heavy with symbolism. Cameras followed as he prayed alongside Netanyahu at the Western Wall, leaving notes in the cracks of the ancient stone and signing the guest book. His wife, Jeanette, was also present, as were Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, and U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee with his spouse. The tableau was designed to showcase unity, continuity, and shared values. Yet behind the smiles and ceremonial gestures lay the difficult questions both governments now face: how to manage fallout from the Qatar strike, how to balance Israel's military campaign with diplomatic imperatives, and how to preserve the image of an unbreakable alliance when Arab anger is reaching new heights. For Qatar, the issue is not simply one of rhetoric. Al-Thani's government has invested years in mediating between Hamas, Israel, and other stakeholders. The strike in Doha jeopardizes that role and raises doubts about whether Hamas leaders can feel safe even under Qatar's protection. For Washington, the timing of the episode could not be more sensitive. U.S. officials are already juggling crises across multiple theaters, from the South China Sea to Eastern Europe. The Middle East, long a drain on American diplomatic bandwidth, once again demands urgent attention. Rubio's reassurances in Jerusalem are aimed as much at domestic audiences in the United States as they are at allies abroad, signaling that Trump's administration remains firmly aligned with Israel. Netanyahu, too, is aware of the optics. By emphasizing the durability of the alliance and comparing it to the stones of the Western Wall, he sought to anchor U.S. Israeli ties in symbolism and permanence. It was a calculated contrast to Qatar's calls for punishment and accountability. What emerges is a sharp divergence in narratives. Israel portrays its campaign as necessary, justifiable, and firmly backed by Washington. Qatar frames the same actions as war crimes, violations of sovereignty, and proof of international double standards. For Palestinians, the conflict continues to exact unbearable costs, with little relief in sight. For Israelis, the message from Netanyahu is one of resilience and defiance, bolstered by U.S. backing. For Washington, the challenge is to keep both messages from spiraling into an unmanageable regional conflagration. Sunday's events, Netanyahu's embrace of Rubio, Rubio's reassurances, and Al-Thani's denunciation, encapsulated the fragile moment the region finds itself in. On one side, a display of solidarity and alliance. On the other, a cry for justice and accountability. Netanyahu's words at the Western Wall underscored his strategy, emphasized the unbreakable nature of U.S. Israeli ties even in the face of controversy. Rubio's carefully measured remarks signaled continuity, but acknowledged the weight of fallout still to be addressed. Al-Thani's forceful condemnation reflected the frustration of Arab states that see little hope in current trajectories. As Gaza suffers through yet another phase of destruction, and as the world watches with unease, the messages delivered in Jerusalem and Doha stand as stark reminders of how divided international responses remain. What happens next will depend not only on decisions made in Israel and Gaza, but also on whether Washington can bridge the widening gulf between its ally and its Arab partners.